Oh boy, everybody. I gotta say, this is not something I was hoping would unravel, you know? I was actually getting a little bit more optimistic about this entire conflict since it seemed like Hamas was willing to play nice and perhaps participate in a proper ceasefire long enough for maybe some negotiations to be made for a longer-term peace. But sadly, it seems the IDF are now the ones breaking ceasefires and pushing further. So they can't say Hamas is at fault for this, right? As over the last couple days, they have begun heavily pushing into Gaza with ground forces and with live updates, as it seems, within the last fucking hour, more airstrikes. So really, to get a good idea of the vibe of what this ground invasion is like, I want to show you guys one video. All right? I want to show you guys this video. If you haven't seen it already, then you should have seen it. This is a sign. It's in Gaza. It just says, "I heart Gaza." It is just a nice little art installation in what appears to be a public park. You got a fountain. You've got some, like, this is just a nice spot. This looks like the kind of spot you just go on your daily walk to go sit down, read a book, you know, enjoy the day, feed some ducks or some birds or whatever. And and you can probably tell this is like a big loop. This is probably like a big road loop where a lot of cars are meant to go through. And you got this sign that says, "I heart Gaza." Nice little, I think there's one in Seattle like this, like an I Heart Seattle. It's a very common thing in towns and cities to have like a little art installation like this. I've seen it in tons of towns. I Heart New York is a very common phrase, you know. Well, we're seeing from the perspective of a IDF tank. A guy with his head sticking out of an IDF tank, I should say. You see, there's a lot of area that this tank could go, a lot of tank treads on the road here, so there's a lot of paths that tanks could go. And where do you want to guess this tank driver decides to go and drive his tank through? Let's watch and see what he decides to do. Remember, this is only about stopping Hamas for these people. Like for the IDF and for the Israeli government, it's only about stopping Hamas. Just stopping Hamas. I promise, guys. I promise. Now watch this video. You don't understand, guys. That was a tactical move, you know? They had to move exactly there into that big open area, which is like exactly where tanks are the most vulnerable, in order to, and thus crushing the sign as a byproduct in order to gain a tactical advantage. It was a tactical decision, guys, clearly. There's nowhere else the tank could have gone, and obviously everyone knows that tanks are the most safe in big, wide open areas, not using any trees or buildings as cover. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows this. This was a clear tactical decision, not some IDF assholes destroying a peaceful symbol that represents Gaza. Just Gaza, really. Like, nothing bad or evil. Just, you know, clearly just some guys, just some guys. This is very clearly fucking evil. Like, if you don't think Israel is motivated by a desire to crush Palestinians and the concept of their, like, autonomy, you are deluded if you don't think there aren't at least a lot of Israelis and IDF fighters who have that motivation. So I didn't cover this when it all started happening because I prefer to wait for, developments to unfold, for news to come out, for information to be confirmed and verified and backed up by numerous sources, for video to come out and photos to come out that back it up, that kind of thing. The breaking news coverage can be kind of risky, and I'm not a gambler, guys. I'm not a gambler. So I like to wait. And, I don't usually get as much attention covering these topics after most of it's all unfurled, and the people who cover it as it's happening have already talked about it. But I think now there's a lot that can be said in the aftermath that is worth saying, and I do want to get this off my chest after all. So this is the most recent update Israeli airstrike in Gaza City kills at least 8, according to witnesses and doctor. An Israeli airstrike, this is an hour and 8 minutes ago. An Israeli airstrike in Gaza City killed at least 8 people, according to witnesses and Dr. Ahmad Alwa of the Al-Ahai Baptist Hospital. I got it. Did I get it? Al-Hi? It might be Al-Ahai, maybe. That sounds more correct. That rolls off the tongue better. And usually the correct pronunciation is whatever rolls better, you know? The doctor also said children were among those killed. Once again, over half, I believe, of Gaza's population are under the age of 18. Obviously, a lot of this, segment are teenagers and stuff, but those are still kids, at least by my metric, and I think by most Americans' metric. And a lot of them are still actual little children. Isn't it strange how more often than not children are killed in IDF operations? Like, it feels like it, at least. Maybe I'm wrong. Is there data that we can look at, like, well-substantiated, backed-up statistical data that tracks the amount of casualties as opposed to non-casualties and child casualties specifically in IDF ground and air operations? I'm really curious. Because if statistically it's far more rare than we'd expect, I'd be happy to report that. I'd be happy to say, like, oh, turns out it's more rare than you would expect. Still happening, and really bad, but I guess less of the IDF is the problem than you would expect. But that doesn't... I've yet to see data that suggests that. Yeah, especially because most of Gaza's population are kids, so if you're going to indiscriminately bomb, you're going to end up hitting kids, It's like throwing a rock on a daycare playground and expecting not to eventually hit a kid in the head, Like, more often than not, you throw rocks blindly on a playground, you're going to start hitting kids. Eyewitnesses on the ground told CNN no warning was given by the Israeli military before it struck a 4-story building in the Al-Daraj neighborhood in the eastern part of the city. Quote, all of a sudden, I heard a loud explosion. I didn't know where the airstrike hit exactly, but I got injured in my hand and in my back. One man who didn't want to be named told CNN. Quote, I ran away quickly because the scene was really terrifying. There was a large number of killed. CNN footage of the aftermath showed the impact on the building, as well as the debris from the explosion all across the road. Shredded fabric and the remains of personal belongings were also seen amid what was left of the apartment. They struck housing infrastructure, as they tend to be doing these days, either housing, power, or medical infrastructure. Some of the deceased children could be seen getting carried away, their bodies wrapped and carefully placed atop donkey carts. These are the targets of Israel, a man walking alongside the cart said, as he pointed towards the bodies. CNN has reached out to the Israeli military for comment on this innocent incident, but has yet to hear back. Isn't that a war crime? It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, whether it's a war crime, genocide, it doesn't matter. They're killing children, and there's a guy walking alongside a donkey cart piled with children's bodies, pointing and saying, these are Israel's victims. And this shit's happening daily at this point. Ever since October 7th, or January 7th? Whatever the fuck. Ever since October 7th, I think it was, this shit has been happening nearly daily. That's how we're in the tens of thousands of Palestinians killed now. It's been so consistent. Israel's operations in Rafah expand from airstrikes to ground operations, satellite images show. The ongoing operation of the Israel Defense Force in Rafah has expanded from airstrikes to ground operations, which includes bulldozing. New satellite imagery obtained by CNN from Planet Labs shows. In addition to the new types of operations, the satellite images show the IDF activity is taking place outside of the immediate border crossing area, which Israel took control of on Monday evening. The images show that IDF forces are over a mile outside of the Rafah crossing gate. These ground operations were precluded by a number of military strikes in Rafah, which CNN has previously reported, but they appear to be ongoing as well. In one image, smoke from a recent military strike is still rising. A number of buildings have been completely destroyed by the military strikes in the last 24 hours. Others have the telltale signs of being razed by bulldozers and other heavy machinery, vehicle tracks, and large swaths of disturbed earth. Dude, this isn't just a military clear out. They're demolishing the buildings once they clear out and evacuate the people. They're just crushing Gaza. They're literally dozing it down into rubble so they can take it and build something new on top of it. The new operations seen on the satellite images bear striking resemblances to how the initial ground invasion was conducted back in late October 2023 and in other parts of Gaza since then. When the IDF moved into northern Gaza, they utilized airstrikes shortly before ground forces moved in. When they did move in, armored bulldozers worked with tanks and other military vehicles to bulldoze and raze buildings. The IDF said in a statement on Wednesday that they were conducting precise counterterrorism operations in the specific areas of eastern Rafah, which includes targeted raids. They also claimed that they had eliminated terrorists and uncovered terrorist infrastructure, as well as underground shafts in several locations in the eastern Rafah area. Isn't it crazy how every time they take out like a cell of Hamas soldiers or like destroy a Hamas operation base, it involves like carts of dead kids? Most of Gaza's population is kids. Yep, I've said that 3 times so far. Thank you. UN says no goods entered Gaza Wednesday through key crossings as it voices alarm over humanitarian situation. United Nations spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric, I think that's how it's pronounced. I've heard that name, Dujarric, voiced alarm on Wednesday over the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. In an operational update, he said that no goods for humanitarian operations have entered Gaza through key crossings, exacerbating challenges amid active hostilities. Dujarric emphasized the critical need for incoming supplies, including fuel, to sustain humanitarian efforts. The situation is urgent, with key medical facilities at risk of becoming inaccessible or inoperable, he added. The evacuation... Oh my god, my lips are dry. Hold on. Good god. I don't know why, but it's not even talking. Reading dries my lips and mouth out like crazy. Way better. Okay. The evacuation of Al-Nayar Hospital, Nayar? I don't know how it's pronounced. Hospital underscores the gravity of the situation, particularly for patients reliant on its dialysis department, the UN spokesperson said. Fuck, dude. There are a lot of people reliant on machines that need sustained power and, like, cannot move. For those that don't know, dialysis is necessary for practically anybody who's going through kidney failure, which is like a lot of people as they get older. It's surprisingly common. And it's essentially a machine that just filters your blood for you and acts as kidneys and then pumps it back into your bloodstream and through your body. Dialysis isn't fun on a good day. It's certainly not fun when your hospital is being bombed by the IDF. One of the 3 hospitals in Rafah, Al-Najjar, had to be abruptly vacated yesterday, as it was located in the area subject to the evacuation orders sent by the Israeli Defense Forces, Dujarric said. It's weird how sometimes Israel will issue an evacuation order, and sometimes they don't, and they just strike without warning. And it makes me wonder, okay, so what percentage of attacks are they not even warning before they attack? And what percentage of those attacks are resulting in dead civilians, dead children, you know? I have a pretty strong feeling that, you know, it's pretty unlikely the average child in Gaza is a member of Hamas or a supporter of Hamas. The UN said it remains committed to providing aid to Gaza's population, including over 1 million people sheltering in Rafah. Martin Griffiths, head of the Humanitarian, Affairs Office, stressed the imperative of protecting civilians and ensuring their basic needs are met, whether they stay or evacuate. Urgent action is required to safeguard lives in Gaza amid escalating tensions, Griffiths added. This is really rough. It really seemed like things were getting better, too, with Biden and, ironically, Hamas being more in favor of some ceasefire and longer-term peace talks. Obviously, Hamas is never going to want long-term peace. That'll never happen. I am in no delusion of believing that would happen. But Hamas does have an interest in getting Israel to stop bombarding them nonstop, because that gives them time to recoup their strength. So there is a mutual need among Hamas and the Palestinian civilians for Israel to stop their constant, like, bombardment, because neither can survive it, you know? Yeah, old guy man thing. I've seen it. It's actually a good video. Okay. Wait, what?
I have pictures.
This is bizarre. I did not believe that I'd seen this video before, but apparently I have, according to YouTube. I think that might be a bug, because this is like a playlist live updated by the news agency, and I've watched some of it before, and so now it's showing as having watched. It's like one of those playlists that has like 3 dots on it, where it's like, this is live updated or whatever. But here is a live news report. This is Fox coverage, so we're probably going to have some good shit to dunk on here. Hamas accepts ceasefire proposal from Egypt and Qatar. Yeah, Hamas has been accepting ceasefire proposals. How about the IDF? How's the IDF doing on that front?
Right now, in the region, you can...
Also, a lot of what Israel says they're doing, or a lot of what Israel's doing, they say they're doing because of the hostages, the hostages, the hostages. They are bombarding where the hostages are they not? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, are the hostages not literally somewhere in Gaza? You know? Like, is this not the best way to handle keeping those hostages alive? This doesn't really seem like the best way to do that, you know? It's like knowing that a bunch of bank robbers have, like, hostages held in a bank, and the police's response to just open fire through the windows indiscriminately. It's like, okay.
You can see there in Rafah, also in Jerusalem, and in southern Israel. We're going to Israel live right now. We're going to be joined there in Tel Aviv by our friend, freelance international correspondent, Zach Anders, and he joins me with all the latest on all of this news. Zach, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. I know you've been extremely busy following all of these headlines, and it's somewhat difficult to know where to start. So let's start with what we know. Over the weekend and today, we learned that the Israeli army was finally getting evacuation orders in place for parts of Rafah. Now, is that a signal that the ground invasion is happening sometime soon? Because we know in that...
It happened an hour ago. This video is like 8 hours old, and the ground invasion started an hour ago. And then less than an hour later, ground or sky air invasion began. Like, they began air operations. That's the articles that we read a minute ago. This is coverage from like 8 hours before what we read just then, which is an hour old.
That interim period, there have been strikes.
This is developing insanely fast. This is, like, currently happening. Like, right now, as we speak, there is a child in Palestine probably died since I started this segment 19 minutes ago, at least one. And that is why we're talking about this, because it is an actively unraveling current tragedy where people are suffering. Like, an unimaginable scale. Like, to a degree you probably could not imagine. Because it's just that bad, and most people haven't been in a situation this fucking bad before.
In the air on targets. So is this going to happen sooner rather than later?
Well, Andrew, I can tell you that at this point in the morning, it's 3:38 here, local time in Tel Aviv.
Not enough time, space, or the right time to evacuate. It's like what do you say, 3:30 a.m.? 3:30 a.m.? That means at 3:30 a.m., you've got a really short timer to fucking evacuate, get everything you have, and go. Fucking where? the continuously shrinking area that is not bombed to rubble, that is going to be bombed to rubble. Like, dude. Oh, Gaza? Well, okay. Well, in Tel Aviv would presumably have the same time zone as Gaza, right? Like, I don't think that they're that far away from each other that they're in different time zones, right? So 3:30 a.m. in Tel Aviv is 3:30 a.m. in Gaza, right? So this is like Palestinians are getting a warning at 3:30 a.m. that they need to fucking evacuate to God knows where, or they get bombed, basically.
Word that we have,
or they'll get caught up in the ground invasion, which might be worse than getting bombed if you really think about it, judging on how the IDF is handling their ground invasion.
Have from the Israeli sources is that the ground forces have already made their way into the eastern area of Rafah, and that they have secured the Rafah crossing. This is something that was expected in a ground campaign would happen. One of the very first things that would happen. There's a long period or window still left ahead. This is not capturing all of Rafah, but it is the only crossing that is open right now between Egypt and Gaza. The Kerem Shalom crossing on the Israeli side between Israel and Gaza was closed on Sunday. I think this is kind of where the most topical timeline begins, because Sunday night is when we have 4 Israeli soldiers killed by either mortar or short-range rocket fire that came from this eastern area of Gaza. Then yesterday at about 9 o'clock...
That explains why this area is getting attacked. Hamas launched an attack, successfully killed some IDF soldiers with mortar fire from this region. Now Israel's gonna fucking glass it. Jesus Christ. Hamas really does suck. Like, fuck the IDF. We're talking a lot about fuck the IDF. That's this entire video, pretty much. But can we also talk about how shitty, like, Hamas is, too? Can we talk about how fucking, like, fuck Hamas, dude. Like, here's an area that hasn't been bombed to shit yet. Let's launch some mortar fire from there to make sure Israel proceeds to, like, where there are civilians, let's launch some mortar fire from there to ensure that's where Israel hits next. There's no winning. There's literally no winning for the civilians. Like, if you are a high-density civilian population in Gaza, it seems like that's where Hamas is going to choose to launch their next attack from. And that is where the IDF is going to be prompted to launch their next attack on. You know what I mean? Hamas accepted the deal. They aren't better, but Israel wiped their ass with the deal they proposed. Yeah, Hamas right now has an interest in a ceasefire, to be fair, because they don't want to be constantly bombed. They need time to, like, recoup and you know, attack again, build up for another attack. So it is in Hamas and the Palestinian civilians' best interest for a ceasefire, which is probably why Hamas is more on board with it than the IDF is. Right now, this is the IDF being in, like, a winning state from their perspective. Why would they agree? So a few IDF soldiers dead equals kill the hostages? Jeez, yeah. Well, I mean, that's their calculus, it would seem. Not that they'll ever say it.
In the morning, they start dropping the pamphlets. And I should say that as those 4 Israeli soldiers were killed, that inside Israel, the sentiment was that this deal, the hostage ceasefire proposal, was all but dead anyways. So Monday morning, 9 o'clock, they start dropping pamphlets. They send text messages to people in the eastern area of the Rafah city, telling them to evacuate. About 100,000 people, not all of Rafah, but a lot of people in Rafah decided now was the time to go anyways. And that's just as soon as we started to see those pamphlets drop, we started to see airstrikes. The spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces, Hagari, said that 50 airstrikes took place throughout the day.
They had about as much time as you have time to they had as much time to get out of the way of the airstrike as you do in Helldivers when your friend accidentally drops one at your feet and you just notice the red light and you're just like, fuck. That's about how much time they had after getting those pamphlets to get the fuck out of Rafah.
I was there for much of the afternoon, noted at least over 24 airstrikes, and then wave after wave of outgoing artillery that was targeting this eastern area of Rafah City. This is also where there was an old airfield, a very historic image there from President Clinton's time when that airport was functioning. A very historic image there from President Clinton's time.
You know what's under that sheet, right? You know what's under the sheet of that donkey cart, right, guys? You know what's under that white sheet. Bodies. A literal pile of bodies. Probably children. You can see body bags on the top of that car. That is that is how you transport bodies. And it's probably children because they're covering the bodies like that so people don't see as they transport them. Probably a lot of children in that pile. We know that's how they transport them. After Israel has launched a strike and there's a bunch of dead people left behind, we know this is how they transport them. They load them up onto a cart drawn by a donkey, and they lead them somewhere where they can be buried properly. That's why they found mass graves. It's because there's been mass killing on the part of Israel. Imagine the smell. I'd imagine they've gotten used to it at this point. Nose blind, but yeah, not pleasant, I imagine. But yeah, that's what's under that sheet. I fucking guarantee it.
When that airport was functioning, so it appears at this point in the morning here in Tel Aviv that they've captured this airfield or what remains of the airfield, and they've pushed into the Rafah crossing and secured this area. So. Right now, there is no independent area or independent crossing that is not controlled by Israel, and that's a big change in the overall landscape of this conflict, but it happened rather fast.
Yeah, I mean, Zach, is it too simplistic to say this, that it seemed like Israel upped the ante over the weekend, that
Jesus Christ, how fucking bad does Israel have to be fumbling the bag with their optics right now for Fox to be saying, it kind of seems like they're upping the ante, you know? Like, this seems a little extreme from Israel. Like, Fox hosts are, like, giving lip service to the idea, man, Israel's going a bit too far on these Palestinian civilians here. Jesus Christ. When Fox is criticizing you for doing too much murder, you know you're doing too much murder.
Began some of these evacuation orders in Rafah, and then today you have Hamas say we're accepting, I guess, our version of a ceasefire deal that we brokered with the Egyptians and the Qataris here after really months of intransigence by, you know, the Hamas political operation, the political bureau there in Cairo, in Doha. So are they related? I mean, can you draw the line from one to the other?
Well, you could say that right here we also have a window of Israel going back on its word, because on Friday they said that Hamas had 1 week left before a Rafah incursion to respond to the deal. So you could say that over the weekend, as those soldiers were killed, that was in Israel's mind, Hamas's response, that they didn't see any discernible progress. So they started to launch this Rafah incursion anyways.
It really sucks. It feels like every time we're close to a meaningful ceasefire, someone on one side or the other kills soldiers or civilians on the other side, right? It's like, on one hand, you can understand a perspective in which a force has shot a mortar and killed 2 soldiers that are soldiers, citizens of your nation, right? That requires some type of response, right? Both politically, for to not have your citizenry be up in arms, that you're allowing your people to be fucking killed without any recourse or response. As well as the argument that it could be seen as weakness. But on the other hand, the response cannot be mass killing children, right? We can't just say okay, well, we get why you killed all those children. They did mortar some of your soldiers after all. It's no, that's not even close to a valid response.
I should give you a little painting of what that looks like too, as we're down south. A lot of these soldiers were on leave, and because of how Israel is, and it being such a small country, they're coming back from their homes, wherever they live in Israel, in their personal cars, or being dropped off by friends, and then they're meeting their units at gas stations, and maybe they haven't seen each other for 2 weeks or whatever it's been, and they're hugging and they're saying hello again. And then they're revealing maps at gas station picnic tables outside, and you walk past them and it looks like they're reviewing and getting ready. And then remarkably, at this point in the night, it's forces like that have gone inside.
Part of the ceasefire deal was that Israel had to leave Gaza. Ooh, yeah. I don't think Israel was ever going to accept that ceasefire deal
Of the eastern area of Rafah, and where the deal stands, or
I think the mortaring was a convenient excuse for something that was going to happen regardless.
Where it stood before Hamas came out and said that they were willing to accept, and again, accept a proposal potentially that was never in front of the Israeli delegation to begin with.
Right.
But yet at this early in the morning, it was Hamas, through their same sources that they used to announce that they had accepted this deal. That morning, they'd said they'd frozen the talks. Right.
Okay.
So it seemed like this was off anyways, and it was a huge surprise when at about 6 o'clock, local time here, they said that they were willing to accept this deal. And immediately, that's the headlines that race around the globe, that there's a ceasefire deal that has been accepted. But right away, all of our Israeli sources were hitting the pavement, saying, pump the brakes. This is not something, this is a ploy by Hamas. This is not something that we have seen. And I had a source that had told me the day before yesterday on Sunday that, the major sticking point here is that we have.
Guys, I don't see this getting better anytime soon. I don't like to doomer about this stuff, but I don't see it getting better anytime soon. I can give one small bit of positive news, and I believe Biden is shutting down shipments of ammunition to Israel. It's like munitions and ammo shipments from America to Israel. Biden shutting down, which I think would be a pretty popular change, like a pretty popular policy decision, if the people who it was for and meant to like make happy and appease like cared about politics. But unfortunately, like anybody who considers this issue, as bad as it is, a reason not to vote for Biden, they don't vote. They don't pay attention to politics. So I don't know how much it's going to do to help Biden's chances, but it is definitely a sort of light in the darkness in regards to like how much is America supporting what Israel is doing. Well, a bit less now. Notably less, actually. And that's at least a silver lining. Doesn't change much materially, but it means that less of our tax dollars are going to doing it, That's what really kind of, I think, broils a lot of people's blood about all of this. The cherry on top of the shit sundae is that our tax dollars are what's paying for this. We're paying for this. In large part, we're paying for these dead children, for these children to be killed. And that adds just a level of sting, a level of burn to this entire situation that I think fuels a fair amount of the I don't want to vote for Biden vibe. But guys, Donald Trump has promised support for Israel unlike anything we've ever seen before. He has promised that if he gets elected, Hamas will be eviscerated within a month. You know what that means, right? He will back a full military annihilation of Gaza within a month of getting reelected. He has been one of Israel's strongest supporters in all of this, loudest and proudest. I promise you, you don't want Trump. You don't want Trump. As bad as Biden is on this, he's not great. I mean, he's better than most, but he's not great. Great would mean, like, considering what's happening unacceptable. That would be great. And then doing something to stop it fully, entirely. That would be great. But he's not actively backing it in the way that Trump is. And that's better than nothing. Well, it's better than negative. It's better than worse than nothing, actually. Which is what Trump is. Anyway, I'm curious to hear what you think about all this, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. I want to see your comments down below. I do enjoy reading them. It also helps the channel a lot in the algorithm. The engagement from the comments really does help. So regardless of whether or not you have anything to say, I do appreciate the comments. Thank you, thank you. If you want to boost the channel further, you can always hit that like button, the thumbs up. Every time you hit the thumbs up, regardless of when, where, or what you're watching, it really boosts it and helps in the algorithm, and I really do appreciate it. And of course, if you want to see me on other platforms, I've got social medias linked down below, but don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and ring that bell icon so YouTube tells you when I go live or upload. And of course, if you want to support me directly financially, you can always do so quite simply by just donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or financially supporting me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, StreamElements, Patreon, or buying some merch through the Streamlabs store down below. Everything is linked. Even if you're not going to buy anything, I recommend checking out the merch store because, you know, it's funny, it's goofy, it's silly. I put work into it, so check it out. And of course, if you want to join my fan Discord, which is like the main hub of my fan base, please consider doing so. There is a link down below. It's totally free. I host watch parties, game events, and call-in streams there. Announce all my uploads and videos and streams there. So as long as you got notifs on, you won't miss anything. And it really is just a fun vibe. So I hope to see you there, and I hope you enjoyed as grim as this topic was.